The Julian Lee Show.
Julian Lee Show.
The Julian Lee Show, starting right now.
Hey guys, it's been a hot minute since I've done some recording. As you can see, we're in my beautiful studio here. My entire basement is not currently set up for recording. Let's just say it was a little wet. Alrighty, today we are doing an assignment for biology. So how I'm going to do this is we're going to go over... Basically, we're going to run over the story real quick. Once we're done with the story, then we will proceed onto the question, my thoughts on it, and we'll call it a day. Alright, this is a journal log for our intrepid explorer who has just landed on a strange planet, Atsalak. Very interesting name. I tried to look that up, didn't really find anything. I was hoping it was some hidden reference, but here we are. You are an intergalactic explorer who just landed on the planet Atsalak. As you begin to explore the planet, you take note of strange occurrences surrounding the large structures scattered throughout the area. The following is a list of observations you made in your field log. Intergalactic Standard 713-976-0815, Day 2 on planet Atsalak. I've noticed large structures that dot the landscape. They're uniquely suited to withstanding the harsh winds that blow across the landscape, as on one side they're sloped, allowing the wind to blow up and across rather than knocking them over. Intergalactic Standard 715-976-0745, Day 4 on planet Atsalak. Last night I built my camp next to one of those sloped structures to keep the wind from destroying my tent. When I awoke this morning, the structure was gone. I was able to identify it several meters away. Poking the structure yielded no results, but they are large enough to make it unlikely they're removed by an external force. Intergalactic Standard 720-976-0815, Day 7 on planet Atsalak. Something amazing has happened. One of the structures, which I had previously thought were too tough to break easily, has broken into two uneven pieces. A small section of the original structure has fallen off. It weighs 3.2 kilograms, only a tiny portion of the original structure. I've decided to remain with this group of structures to further study the phenomenon. And finally, the last entry we have is Intergalactic Standard 810-976-0815, Day 27 on planet Atsalak. Today I weighed the tiny chunk from Day 7. Now 20 days later it weighs 6.9 kilograms. Such a change would indicate growth. Are these structures alive? Now, on returning home, our brave explorer speaks with his colleague Jeff about it. And his colleague Jeff believes that you have discovered life. So then the prompt is, do you agree with him? Why or why not? So let's get into it. In order for something to be considered alive, there are 7 little category thingies that it has to meet. So we're going to go over them really quickly. All life needs to be organized. Usually this is kind of a cellular thing, so everything's made up of cells. And that's kind of one of the key things. It does have to have an organization of sorts. All life has to reproduce. All life has to grow somehow. All life has to convert or use energy in some form. All life has to exhibit homeostasis, which is kind of basically keeping your systems in check. So like if you went outside and it was 30 degrees outside, you would not instantly like turn into a popsicle. That's homeostasis. All living things respond to some sort of stimuli, whether that's heat, cold, touch, something. They react to something. And finally, all living things have to adapt. And this can be long-term things, this can be short-term things. You and I would kind of make our own adaptation, but we would also adapt a little bit. If, for instance, you grew up somewhere that's really cold or really hot, and you moved to somewhere of another climate, over time you would get used to that new climate, and that is an adaptation. So let's kind of go through each of the items one at a time. So as far as organization goes, I do think that we can assume that this thing is probably organized. Organization, I feel like, is one of the most basic things that even a lot of non-living things really fulfill, because a lot of things have cellular structure or atomic structures, that sort of thing. I feel like probably this one we can check off fairly easily. Now we get to start the fun part where I disagree. So all life does have to reproduce, and while the part breaking off from the top could be considered a reproduction, I am not entirely convinced, especially with them bringing up the wind. The climate on this planet we don't know, so rain could have chipped away that piece. Over time, erosion, damage, a lot of structures will break depending on their environment, and that's one thing I'm concerned about. But in case I'm crazy, let's keep moving on. So all life does grow. One thing that we did notice was the little baby rock, or whatever we're going to call it, did hypothetically change weights. Now, a lot of things can cause this. Waterlogging, we're not entirely sure what material this is made out of. I mean, a wooden structure that size could just as easily have this happen, where, you know, it gained in weight, and it could just be purely water weight. A lot of you right now is water weight, so there's something to think about there. Now, some of the things we do not know, all life has to convert or use energy. We have nothing about this. I mean, you could assume, but you could just as likely, your assumptions would be wrong. All life has to exhibit homeostasis. We see nothing about it maintaining an internal temperature. Our scientist does a very terrible job about tracking these sorts of things. All living things respond to stimuli. Again, we don't really see a whole lot. You could potentially consider the fact that it moved away from his tent, an idea that maybe it's stimuli to touch. And then finally, all living things have to adapt. And I do feel like this one, you could argue either way. With it having that slope sort of thing on it, it could be an adaptation over time. But again, we don't really have any concrete things. So all in all, let's run through the checklist real quick to see which ones we have and which ones we don't. So organization, we do have. Reproduction, let's just throw it a bone and say we do have that as well. Growth, I'm still gonna argue no. But it's not really important because, again, we don't have energy conversion and we don't have homeostasis. We might have stimuli and we might have adaptation, but at the end of the day, you have to have all 7 in order to be considered a living thing. If we start breaking the rules for one thing versus another, then you just end up with a whole lot of mess. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I don't think it's alive. I have some evidence for it. And well, yes, you could definitely claim that there were certain things. You cannot claim there are all 7. And that is what we care about. So have a good night, guys. I promise I will get back to making some actual videos here shortly.